or in church or in the back pew. I don't know.
Well, I never got to church.
And I'll start praying for you.
Thank you.
5:30, I'd like to call the Logansport Parks and Recreation Board meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Just a reminder for all visitors, please make sure that you sign in with your name and address by the podium. And now we'll have the mission statement from Inc.
Logansport Parks and Recreation is committed to improving the quality of life for Loganland residents by preserving land, facilities, the environment, and our natural heritage, and by creating significant opportunities for recreation, conservation, relaxation, and education for now and future generations.
Thank you. Approval of the minutes from June 14th. Are there any corrections that we need to make note of? All right, let's move on to old business, the RFP for Spencer Pavilion. Turn this over to Jan.
Okay, so they were due to the Spencer Park RFPs were due today, and we did not have a Board of Works meeting this morning. So it's actually, since it stated that we were going to open it at Board of Works, we have to open it at next week's Board of Works. And so Clerk Treasurer informed me that I just need to be sure to write an addendum to at least the one person who did, or the one company that did send in an RFP. So that was the first thing that I wanted to say. The next was that I feel like we need to appoint a committee of people to work on this. Certainly a couple park board members, and I think a couple members of the community would be a part of that too. And so it's not just us, you know. So that's my suggestion on that. And then let me back up a little bit. Then if they open that next week, then I can get maybe our committee together to review that proposal, and because they'll just take it under advisement at Board of Works, and then we can go through it and see what questions we have them come in and do an interview with them, and then decide where we're going to go from there. If you want to hire them or not, you know.
Comments from the board?
Anybody on the city council be on?
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea.
Okay, new business. We have a park board resolution for auctioned items. I'm going to read the resolution out loud as we kind of determine that that's something that probably should be done. So let me grab that real quick. Okay. Parks Board Resolution 2023-05, a resolution of the Logansport Parks and Recreation Board requesting auction proceeds. Whereas the Logansport Parks and Recreation Board governs the facilities within the Logansport Parks Department as provided by the Logansport City Council Ordinance 97-42. And whereas the Logansport Parks and Recreation Department participated in the city auction of surplus equipment, in which our old equipment produced a net of $10,937.57. And whereas, since a reduction of private donations for Christmas in the Park is anticipated, along with other necessary contractual services, which requires a transfer of funds into that line item, 100-4-4070-431.050, and whereas auction proceeds require the council to approve the specific additional appropriation, now therefore be it resolved by the Logansport Parks and Recreation Board of the City of Logansport that we request $2,937.57 from the city's auction proceeds as an additional appropriation to be deposited into the contractual services line item, as mentioned before, in the Parks General Fund. This resolution shall be in full force and effect after its passage by the Logansport Parks and Recreation Board and passage of the Logansport Common Council. Discussion? Questions?
We don't have any we got some funds in non-reverting operating for Christmas in the park, but we don't have enough. I do anticipate that the hospital's already indicated they're not going to be able to do the same grant that they've done in the past. Security Federal wasn't able to do that last year, so I already know we're already down some significant dollars. So anyway, this would be real helpful if we had these funds in our contractual services to take care of Christmas in the park.
And I think you mentioned in the future you're going to try to add that to our budget.
I will show. Yeah, I'll show you how I did that in a little bit. Yeah.
Do we have a motion to pass the resolution?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor of passing Resolution 2023-05, requesting auction proceeds, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes.
I need to add a subject to the agenda that, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that at the beginning. We need to hire a maintenance assistant to replace Terry DeWitt, who has retired. If we could add that to the agenda, I'd appreciate it.
Under new business?
Yeah. Or it can be on my staff report, whichever you want to do it.
This is hiring. We have somebody to hire now, or are we just approving it?
No, you're approving a hire.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion that we add to the agenda, adding a new position and the approval of that.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we will add to the agenda the hiring approval of a new person to replace Terry.
His name is Ryan Hall. He has an expertise in safety training. He is also he fits in very nicely with our team already, and has created a great morale within our group. And he's probably about 10 years from retiring, so he's also able to handle that part of it as well. And his wages will be $17 an hour, contingent upon your approval.
Does he already work for us? You said
He's been doing part-time work for us. Yep, he's been doing 32 hours a week and without benefits. So hiring full-time will give him full benefits for the city. I think he has to work for 30 days before that all kicks in, but he'll be able to get perf, he'll be able to get paid time off and insurance, of course, medical, working at the clinic, or being able to utilize the clinic, and all those things after 30 days, yeah. But he also still has a 90-day probationary period that every new employee does, even if they've been on time or been part of the part-time staff. But he's been a really good fit with our group, has a great understanding of what we're trying to accomplish, and I'm glad to have him. So,
Do we have a motion to approve the hiring of Ryan Hall?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion passes to hire Ryan Hall.
Thank you.
And we are on to staff reports. We'll go to Jan for the administrator's report.
Okay, so I'm just going through some of the projects list on my management report from July 10th. Basically, I'm going to start from the bottom. The Spencer Shelter, obviously, we got the press release distributed and the RFPs off. Met with potential consultants at the site on June 28th. We had 3 companies join us that day, and actually 2 of them ended up were working together to make that proposal. We've got 2 of them made that proposal. So anyway, of course the pool and splash pad are open. Lots of activity going on there. I'll get to an actual report here in a minute. The Patrioticity Grant has been kicked off, and it is going slow. I'm not super excited about what's going to happen with that. I don't know if we'll get there or not, but I hope so. We did get for the master plan, the Riverside site plan revisions from Lehman & Lehman, all their actual plans and then their renderings, and we were able to show those certainly at the master planning meeting, and then also at Squeal and Neal. We showed it also on July 4th, or had those available for people to see. I didn't have any negative comments about the plan, so there might be still some out there, but we didn't voice it to me during those times. So we also still have a survey out for park users if they want to. A survey out there for park users. They still want to get it on that. We're trying to get to 150. I think we have about 110 right now. So if you haven't done one, you should feel free to do it. So Stonewall Park, the road and concrete work are complete. Still have landscaping to be done as well. And then also the Viking Clubhouse, we have met with 2 different families with 2 significant donations for the clubhouse, and then others have also we've gotten some others. So we're about at, including the cities, we're at 2.25 million right now. So to our 3.5 million goal. So it's coming. Let's see what else is on there. We do have a star party this coming Friday night with Forrest Hamilton. If you've never had the chance to come to that, it's really cool. He's got telescopes out and really gives people a chance to really look at the stars and the different planets in the sky. So Kevin will even have the lights turned off, won't you? But that's at Houston Park on Friday night at 8 o'clock and 8 to 11 so you can come and go if you need to. I'm going to let Kevin talk about his and Tara talk about hers. Dean I'm going to go ahead and do Dean's report. He is taking a well-deserved day off. Last week was a real bear for him. He had his invitational over the weekend. We had 108 teams, which is the most he's ever had. And if you look at his report for the month of June, you'll see that he has brought in. Where's my notes on that? He's brought in an additional. They had over 1,500 extra rounds of golf, both dollar rounds and full price rounds, and brought in an extra $47,000 over last year at the same time. So And he wanted you to know too that even after this weekend, they're $20,000 over what they were in or July of last year. So he's really having a phenomenal summer there at Diker and getting really lots of people up. And we really feel like a lot of it has to do with the website, social media, that because Kyle Smith has been helping him with some of that. And he's just really excited about how we think that's made a big difference for him, the golf course. So very pleased about that part of it. So July 4th it was great. I think we didn't have as big a day, as long a day as what we've had in the past. Starting at 5 instead of 2, but I think everybody was still just as pleased with that day that we did. You know, the time that we were there. I think the fireworks went off great. The music was great. We got a couple little things to tweak for next year. We always do. But I thought it was a really great day. So it was, of course, really hot. And so anyway, and the pool report is in your packets there. Where's it at? There it is. You'll see they had almost 600 people come through the turnstile there in the month of June. They had 8 rentals, and they had 41 swim lessons. And then they had 16 people for the Mommy and Me. It's actually called Minnie and Me, not Mommy and Me. And their average patrons were 112 per day. We haven't had that much weather issue, but you know, it's the day starts out cloudy and gloomy. It kind of ends up that way even by 2 or 3 o'clock. Even if the sun comes out, they just don't come back out. So it's just kind of weird like that. But having a good summer, having a couple personnel things. Of course, we always have that too. You know, so they're teenagers, so yeah. So anyway, they're learning. So, but Hannah and Claire have got a good handle on stuff, and I'm proud of the work they're doing. So, let's see what else is there. And then Tim Knoll retires at the end of this month, right? Not at the end of next week.
End of the month.
End of the month. Okay, so the 31st. So, and we're going to do a luncheon for him and for George Elpers, who's retiring at the golf course at the end of August. So, but we're going to do one big lunch, kind of a barbecue lunch at Houston Park. So, anyway, that's where we're at. Okay, I do have one question for you. If you had a chance to look at the website or the master plan report from the surveys, one of the things that came out that I saw was that people really would like to see parks be smoke free. Would you guys like me to pursue that as a?
I thought it was smoke.
Well, you know what? It's smoke. There's smoke-free zones, and those are 25 feet from bleachers, playgrounds, or athletic fields, buildings of any kind. The state's mandate is 8 feet from any building, but we try to do it 8 feet or 25 feet from any recreational activity area. So they are not technically smoke-free, but the city ordinance shows that they are 25 feet away from those facilities.
I would be in favor of something like that. I just, having been in other parks, it's kind of nice, and if you have to deal with it when you're walking or something, it's kind of a pain. But so I have no problem pursuing that.
Main thing is getting it enforced.
Well, just like now, it's tough to enforce it,
Right.
but it is something it's a common courtesy, you'd think, but it's not. I must have announced it at July 4th half a dozen times to please be courteous about smoking, and people still don't, smokers don't care. So it's still going to be hard to do, but I think, we can get some signage up. I think we thought that the Youth Services Bureau might be able to work with us on it. And so we'd like to at least try. It's definitely going to have to go through council if we are going to do that. But I think if we got a group of people to put together a plan, I think that's what we need to do. Some signage and all that. So that was one thing. And then I wanted you to know that next meeting we're going to try to have our 2024 fees ready to go for you to start. And if anybody's interested in working on those with Kara and Kelly and me, I would be happy to have you be involved. So I also gave you in the back of your packets the budget for 2024 that I turned in just this afternoon. And so there just I'll just kind of give you some highlights of things. Two things that we want to do for next year. One is parking the box. We want to make it a every afternoon, 5 days a week for 8 weeks. And maybe in cooperation with the schools doing activities in the morning. So we added, in our temporary help, we added almost $12,000 for that. We also added security personnel to the salaries and wages. The police chief has told me it would be about $30 an hour. And that's a low one. That's a low. He said that Squeal and Eel paid $60 an hour for their event, and Taysicass County pays $45 an hour. So I don't know how that'll do, but so anyway, that's that. You see that here on the first page of that security personnel for $86.40. That's 17 weeks, 4 days a week, 4 hours a day. So for each day. So at $30 an hour. So moving on down, we'll see at the very bottom the supplies for free community programs. Earth Day is part of that. July 4th is part of that. Fall Fest is part of that. And I know Carol will come up with some other stuff, so she always does. So we have also added. Kevin is going to work on trying to get the lights around Riverside Park. We had problems with the ball field lights after the fireworks, and it was really dark in that park after that. And so it was. It's really important that we work at getting some lights there. Even though we're going to be probably doing something else eventually as we do the park. This is just a small fix-it. He's going to try and get some of the poles that are already there to get working. So he's going to work on that. So moving back halfway down, you'll see $10,000 for Christmas in the professional services for Christmas in the park. Added that, and then the next page, we got planning to do Fairview restroom rehab. That was built in 2005. It needs a new roof. The stalls the partitions are in bad shape. The sinks are in bad shape. They all need to be repaired and fixed up. So that's one of the things on our project list. Also replacing the roof at Penman Building is on our project list. And he's got several pieces of machinery there. I did put in for the Spencer Park Lower Pavilion $250,000 as part of what we're asking for. I don't know if that's a good figure yet or not, but with the $100,000 we have this year, if we can make it so we can encumber that somehow by the end of the year, that'll give us some funds to do something significant with that shelter. got $100,000 on Spencer Park, the small shelter replacement. So that's all the little shelters up there in Spencer Park to do more like what we just did at Fairview. And then the other one is that I want to replace that shelter at Bishop Park. It's ready to. It's not in good shape, and it's really. We have more people there than you ever think. When I drive by there, there's a lot of times there's somebody in that shelter with a family gathering or something. So it needs to be bigger, and it needs to be a nice one. So along with that, then we've also included getting that court. If you've ever been there, it was built up so that you could put water in it for ice skating. And so, but that's a tripping hazard. It's really kind of dangerous. So we need to get that taken out and then get that court redone. So that's under sport court improvements. 50,000 in playground equipment. That's what we usually, or that's where we're at right now this year. And that's it for the parks. Swimming pool, there isn't, and in fact, I didn't raise it very much. I just made sure that we had plenty for lifeguards and cashiers. I think the one thing that we're going to have to start addressing at some point sooner or later is replacing the bathhouse overall. That bathhouse, you can't get water to run through those pipes very well at all. It's really bad. You're trying to get kids to take showers before they go in the pool, but it's like a trickle. That's all it is. It's coming out of those shower heads. And it's nothing to do with work you're not doing or doing. It's because the water pressure into that building is really poor. So either the plumbing all needs to be redone or, right? I mean,
Got that water tower right next door to you.
Yeah.
huh?
You got that water tower right next door. It should be.
You'd think, wouldn't you?
Should have good
But
pressure.
it's really terrible water pressure. So anyway, that's something I want you to know that it's going to have to address at some point. Then on next page on non-reverting park operating plans, we added, so we went ahead and identified exactly how much is needed for each of the programs that people will pay into. So Kara has an idea of exactly how much she can spend for, if we're going to bring in $1,500 worth of registration fees for Nerf War, then she can spend up to $1,000 for that. So we did that with the Park in a Box, Breakfast with Santa, Mother Son Nerf War, and the Daddy Daughter Dance. So I cut the budget on the holiday program events because we put $10,000 in the general fund for Christmas in the Park. Okay, so this holiday program event is still to cover whatever other Christmas incidentals we need to do. I changed bingo supplies to an actual service. It's not a supply anymore. We're not buying groceries. We're sending the money to the Senior Citizen Center for them to do with it. So it's actually a contractual service. Marketing, we did raise that another couple $1,000 because we've been working on radio stations, social media, Indiana Media, White County Visitors Bureau, and all the memberships we do. It's $7,000. It's crazy. And the other thing, we've hired an army of 5 to take care of the rentals of the McHale complex and the Penman building, and they are so it's now a contractual service rather than an employee taking care of the people that are renting those facilities. So, and so this would take care of their contractual obligations. We'd have a contract with them, and that's where it will come from. So, and then also had Valentine's Day event down on the second page of the non-reverting operating. So, moving on to the golf, there's really not any big changes there. We did add irrigation to the supply line items, and we added a media consultant in junior golf lessons there on the second page of the golf operating fund. So media consultant is actually Kyle Smith, who has been, he's been doing what he's been doing as a volunteer. He needs to be compensated for the time he's spending on that for the park, for the golf course. And then junior golf lessons, I don't know why we haven't had this before, but it needs to be scheduled in there. You'll also notice that we have he didn't want anything in tournament cart runs because he's got enough cards. Yay! So, he would like to attend a PGA golf seminar sometime this next year or in 2024. So there's an additional couple thousand there because for travel and the conference fees. So their contractual services is $7,000 for their website. Remember, we entered into this last year, so that's what that is. And then you'll see that here's the $200,000 per year. We put that in there according to the ordinance, and that's really about where we're at. So I know I'd read through that really quick. I emailed it to you so you can look at it on emails too. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you. I know I'm getting you cold, and I'm sorry, but that's why I sent it to you. And you got time to digest it and go through it, so don't feel like you have to have all the answers tonight.
Okay, let's move on to the Recreation Director's report.
Good evening. So, really, it has been awesomely busy since June. I think we thought to ourselves, let's have an 8-week program, do a 5-year master plan open house, and a fundraiser for a dog park, all at the same time. But also, we've had swim lessons, junior golf camp, and tennis. And so it's been a very busy couple months. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm looking forward to the pool closing. I never say that usually, but kids going back to school, I'm kind of looking forward to it just so I can breathe a little bit. But, it's been a lot of fun. We really started trying to market everything earlier this year, put the calendar together at the end of December, started getting it out to the public, and we have really had a lot more of our classes filled, which we always want our instructors to do really well. And so I'm pretty excited about that. 4th of July went really well. I feel like we had about 5 times as many people pour in around 8 p.m. than last year. We knew that might happen with the holiday falling the way it did. I think a lot of people had to work the next day, so they stayed local for the holiday. I saw a lot of smiling faces, a lot of families having fun together. We did have a lot of smoking just in amongst the people right by the music, and that was hard to breathe, really. I mean, for anybody who has asthma or breathing issues, and so we do hope that we can work with the Service Alliance to get some signs. They're always trying to collaborate with us, and I think this will be a great opportunity to collaborate with them for some funds for signage. Park in a Box has been really fun. It continues to grow week over week. Last week, we partnered with Scooters Coffee, and I love Miss Janine. She called me and said, hey, I'm a new manager, and I really want to partner with you somehow. And I said, wonderful, I have 2 ideas. And so she partnered with us for our Park in a Box. We did a dinosaur theme. And so she read The Littlest Barista, and then one of her brew crew, is what they call it, read another dinosaur book. And then the kids were able to take a little air dry clay piece and do a dinosaur imprint into it. And so I told them, take it home. You can paint it at home if you want. And so each week we have obstacle courses. Ian is our seasonal assistant, and he is just doing an amazing job. He's very patient with the children, and He always makes his obstacle courses really fun. So we have games, coloring pages each week. This week we did Space Week, and we teamed up with Classical Conversations of Logansport and their local homeschool group. They have an inflatable planetarium, and so the kids are actually able to stand up inside and see constellations. That was really fun, and it tied in really well with our Star Week. So we'll end the week with Horace Hamilton. The kids were also able to do rocket crafts, obstacle course, and they were actually able to paint a planet today. And so we've been very, very busy, but just having fun. The best thing is to see the little looks on their faces. And this year I'm getting to see kids that were little teeny tiny last year, and they're growing. And so it's really fun to watch that. You guys have any questions?
Nope.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for your work on that.
Thank you.
Maintenance Superintendent's report.
Evening.
Good evening.
Well, if you see your packet, we have really, that's live. We've been very busy. We got almost 3 pages worth of things that we've been doing in the parks. Multiple trees have fallen. That's been taking up a lot of time. Not much to really report on. I mean, things are just going pretty smoothly. Yes, we have had a retirement, and we're about to see another one, and our summer help is coming to an end with the kids going back to school, so we will be dropping 5 people really quickly, which will leave our staff down bare bones to 4. So, I mean, but with the season changing and start tapering off, get to that fall time and keep playing catch up and maybe come ahead on this. And yeah, been working with different people. Bob Laughlin with Laughlin Concrete got our pad poured over at Fairview. We took possession of our new Icon shelter at Fairview today. That came in on a truck, so hopefully we'll be working with the school corporation again to get that next pavilion raised in that location. Been working with Brad Sparks, trying to establish a septic system back at Dykeman to get those updated, make that a little more inhabitable. Just been overall busy and try and keep on top of everything. So, but it's good.
We also met yesterday with Steinberger Construction and Aaron in the planning department, and Jessica Kranz, who has been working on the Logansport Reimagined program. And one of their projects was to get that ramp at Spencer Park ready for kayaks and canoes to use. And so Steinberger is going to come in on board, we hope, to help us get that done at a reasonable fee, whatever. I'm not sure. I'm hoping we're just gonna have to pay for concrete. So
Yeah, they said that they're hoping for more donation than anything. They seem to be on board for donating a lot of time
yeah,
now.
they're pretty good.
And then
about
working
that.
with the Boy Scouts, the Eagle Scouts, to help with those projects. You probably saw Jan's list. We put together a list of feasible projects.
I know, did I send that to you guys?
Don't remember.
So,
It was a pretty comprehensive.
It's a pretty good
Comprehensive.
list of different projects that would help get the Scouts projects to do to get them into their Eagle Scout badge, and some really good opportunities to work with the parks and build those relationships. And so yeah, there's some really neat things on there. So hoping some of those actually come to fruition.
Go ahead.
Oh, I had a quick question. Did we ever decide anything with the dump station at Spencer Park? Because I know you had talked about the situation with its maintenance an issue and stuff.
Maintenance is still an issue. We haven't. It's still functional. We still let the RVs dump there, but we still have some. There is a website somewhere. I have not found it, but it is said that our dump station can be used for, like food trucks to come in as long as they add detergent to their oils and stuff that they can dump there, which isn't the case. So I'm not sure where that's published. So we need to get that. But I've worked with Cameron Dillon with the utilities and Jackson Wisely, and pretty much they've come to the conclusion and said, ultimately, it's kind of our decision. If it becomes more of a hindrance than what it's worth, then ultimately that's our call to either police it better or do away with it, because it is a source of maintenance. It is a headache because we have to call the utilities in for them to do the work on it because it's sizable. I mean, when that stuff gets dumped down the drain, it becomes a big problem. But we have no way of policing it either, so we don't know who's doing it. So.
Is that something you want us to address at next meeting? My thought was to make a decision and then make sure everybody knows about it for 6 months before we actually do it. Because I know there's going to be lots of complaints about it, but
the reason I brought it up is in the summertime I walk a lot in the parks, and I mean during the morning, and some lady with a minivan, I mean I think she was a hoarder, she just was dumping stuff in there, and I don't know what it was. And I just started thinking, this is not an RV dumping traditional waste. I don't know what it is, but so I think something should be done. If it's causing a problem that we're having to get utilities out, I mean,
we've had a couple backups, haven't we?
We've had some backups,
That's
some
not
big
good.
grease holes. So yeah, it is a headache, and it's the water usage out there is unmetered too. So anybody can fill up thousands of gallons of water without it being metered. So that's another one of our issues that there's just no way of knowing.
Yeah, we pay for that. Whatever happens in that, we pay for that, or the parks do. So, it's not free to us.
Yeah, it's part of our system. So.
Thanks.
On Tower Park, Mulehausen Park, it's mowed great and everything. But on 19th Street side, I noticed where the bleachers were, you got weeds and thistles and everything growing up there. Mike Fincher stopped by at my house and we discussed it. Is there any way to have those guys spray it or kill the weeds down?
So I'm gonna kind of take the bullet for that one because I did kind of preemptively pull the poles and the concrete for the scoreboard. You see the scoreboard concrete up there, and then I added a whole bunch of dirt up there in preparation for removal of the dugouts to have fresh dirt to go in there that's actually seedable to grow grass in. So I added all that dirt kind of preemptively before we really got the go forth on the dog park. We had talked about it, kind of coming to fruition a little bit earlier in the spring, which is fine, but it hasn't. So I kind of put that stuff up there hoping that we could really hit it going forward, and now it's fresh, good dirt. So what good dirt's going to do is going to grow crazy. So that is something that I need to address quicker than not. I would hate to sterilize it since it is good black dirt. I guess it's just I kind of jumped the bullet or gun on it, and now we're kind of seeing the.
Trim them, cut them down, or whatever need to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
But on that same, we put in the budget to get where I found a hydro hammer for the skid steer to be able to jackhammer all that concrete away. So
Right.
We're supposed to be taking possession of that here within a week or two, and then we'll be able to get rid of that big concrete and stuff. So yeah, I'm hoping to get it looking a lot better than what it should be. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda are visitor comments, and I just want to remind everybody to please speak into the box on the table. The microphone system here is a little odd, and some people get up there and push it out of the way to lay their stuff down, and then nobody hears what was said. So it's important for record keeping and minutes and things like that. So any visitor comments tonight? Paul?
Thank you. Paul Wilhelm, 630 South 15th Street. It was brought to my attention last week that there is going to be an application made to the Historic Preservation Commission to have Spencer Park declared both locally and nationally registered. That's going to directly impact your RFP in some way, shape, or form, because if that's granted, and I expect the Historic Preservation Commission will probably approve it, and I similarly expect the City Council will probably approve that, that creates a new process where whatever contractor you would select would have to go before the Historic Preservation Commission and go through what's a COA process, which essentially means review of their plans to make sure that it meets with historic preservation standards. And there is a great deal of leeway with those standards. Sometimes they don't hold people to, a lot of people think that historic preservation means that it has to be restored exactly the way it was. And HPCs have become much more flexible about that. For example, with churches, they used to require that everything had to have a slate roof. If it had a slate roof, it had to continue. And they really recognize that saving a structure is more important than a strict adherence to a standard. But if that does happen, that's going to create an extra layer for you to consider with that RFP. Additionally, I do like Jan's idea of having some sort of collective group to deal with the Spencer Park Pavilion. I would actually recommend that you might want to consider starting a 501c3 nonprofit to do fundraising for that structure long-term.
We already have one, not for historic particulars, but for parks particular stuff, so.
Yeah.
I mean, our foundation is already a 501c3.
It would give you an option to be able to do fundraising. I'm a little concerned about the fact that I read the RFP. I'm a little concerned with the timeline because it really essentially pushes any work on that structure into next year. And given the engineering report that you people have had for over a year now, I'm really concerned that we may need to make some stabilization efforts before this winter. I don't know how you address that. It's something to consider. Maybe as part of when you read whatever from the RFP proposal you get, maybe they're addressing that idea that there's going to have to be some repairs made. There is currently money allocated for emergency repairs. And I understand the need to try to do an entire restoration project. However, if the building falls down over the winter, then it becomes a complete recreation prospect, and that is a very expensive proposition indeed. I believe there's some things that could be done, and I'm sure the engineers that prepared the original report could probably come up with a very basic list of things that they think probably ought to be done in case we have a big snow load. And it might be relatively simple, but I think it's something you probably need to explore, because if we have a really bad winter, given the structure and some of the things, it could actually accelerate certain parts and certain deficiencies in it, which would ultimately add to your overall restoration costs down the road. So I think it'd be just prudent to kind of think about that and, take that into consideration.
Are you able to share who's making the request to put this on a register?
It was discussed at the Historic Preservation Commission meeting, but I don't know when the actual application's coming in or who's making it. I do know Indiana Landmarks will review it, but I don't know who actually is authoring the application. I've not been asked to do anything on it, so I don't really know what's going on with that. But I do know if they make that application, that creates another layer. But at the same time, it opens various grant and funding opportunities to you, which you don't have. And if expenses run to be more than we might think they were, that would certainly open up opportunities for other grants and fundraising.
So when somebody makes a request to put this on a register, what is on the application, like, besides the fact that it's old, like, what kind of criteria do they have to have that anybody would consider, oh yes, this needs to be?
There are several criteria for historic preservation nomination. Just because a building's old doesn't mean it's necessarily eligible. Right now, the way that the law is written, if a property's 50 years old, it could be nominated for local designation. For national designation, there are certain criteria that basically talk about, is it a unique example? Is it a last of its kind type of example? Is it something where significant events happened? And there were a number of significant events that happened at that pavilion over the years. So, I mean, in terms of the criteria that would be required, it's a variety of things. It can be based on architecture, it can be based on history, it can be based on events, it can be based on structure that tells the story of a neighborhood or community. So, I mean, there's a lot of different criteria they look at. Local designation is not the same as national nomination. They look at all those things, but they're looking primarily at how that structure fits into local history, how it fits into being a structure that needs to be saved, that tells the story of Logansport, essentially. It's what they would be looking at on something like that. Each application is different.
And the reason I ask is, one of the questions that goes through my mind that I've never really heard an answer to is, what makes that pavilion historically significant, other than the fact that it's old? I mean, was there a presidential address there? Was there, like, what is it that actually makes it significant and not just a 100-year-old structure?
It's one of the few remaining examples of dance pavilion left in the state. And that's originally what that structure was. It was primarily used as a dance pavilion back when it was built. That's why it had a wood floor. It's a better example than most of that style of architecture, that what they call that park pavilion. Those were built in one form or another, and a lot of the parks had them here in town. There used to be some at Dyckman. Even every city had those kind of pavilions. And what normally happened was, during the Depression, the WPA project demolished most of those. The Works Progress Administration was creating work for people. And in a lot of cities, those things were totally gone. So if you go to parks, like if you go to Fort Wayne, they've got a park up there. It was built in the 1930s. That was part of that WPA process. It's a stone building, and they just recently restored it. So to have a wood frame structure pavilion is very unusual. There just aren't many of them in the state. I've been looking around trying to find any similar, and I've had a hard time finding any. There's one or two in Illinois, one of which just recently had a restoration, but it's a much bigger structure. It's a two-story structure. So in terms of that, in terms of history, we know there were a number of 4th of July celebrations that were held there where there were significant people speaking. And I've not gone through and read all the history. I do know that that site at one point was used by the military during the Civil War era, even before it became the Spencer Park Pavilion, was used by the Civil War troops to be there. So there's apparently a great deal of history on that site in general. And the pavilion in and of itself is a structure that you just don't see anymore. They've all been torn down. They've all been so drastically modified that they no longer look like they looked 120 years ago.
On the registry, so once it gets on that list, does that come along with national state funding automatically?
It's a two-step process. Local designation, we have about 16 properties in the city that are locally designated. That means that those properties have a COA process. It means if you're going to change windows or you're going to add on, you have to go through a COA process. 2018 North Street, that big house, the old Dishler house on North Street, that's a locally designated house. That house has to go through a COA process whereby any work that's done, a contractor has to submit it, they review it, they approve it, and then the city gets a permit. If they were, for example, going to say, well, we're going to tear down half that house and put a metal roof on it and vinyl siding, the Historic Preservation Commission would probably say, no, you can't do that. But generally speaking, historic preservation just provides a structure. Now, National Registry opens you up for a lot of grants, but National Registry nomination is almost totally honorary. The only case where it comes in would be if, say, the Army Corps of Engineers was going to do a project there and they wanted to tear that down. They would have to go through what's called a Section 106 review, where they would have to demonstrate it has to go for this reason. I mean, nationally registered properties are demolished all the time, But if it's a federal undertaking involving the Army Corps of Engineers, Department of Housing and Urban Development, or certain activities under the American Waterways Act where the Army Corps of Engineers is involved, then there has to be a Section 106 review to see, can we work around it? If it does have to come down, how do we interpret the story, or how do we do it? Can the building be moved? It really depends on the circumstances as to how it's treated.
Yeah, I think maybe Rich Voorhees sent me, or maybe you did, the two-level at Moline, Illinois, and I noticed they had a plaque. It had a lot of, I mean, there's probably, I don't know, 70 different, like, businesses that donated. So
Right.
That's where the whole, I think, 501c3 might come into play, where,
Yeah.
much as we did with the State Theater or the Carousel, actually, you know, you may have to get some local group together. I mean, it may be bigger than the parks to do. what-
And there were modifications that were made to that building. For example, you may notice it has a roof inside because there were issues with bats and birds, and they elected to put a roof structure in there, which allowed them to recess their lighting and do all that stuff. Again, it's a modification, but it wasn't technically an exterior modification because typically that only covers the outside of a building. So, you know, it gives you flexibility to do things that you would normally want to do to preserve a building. It only gets involved as if you want to do something stupid. I mean, that's the primary reason why there's local designation. It prevents people from doing something really bad to a building or.
If you can't get the funding to get it all done, I mean, it somehow, I mean, obviously, if it doesn't, if we can't get the funding, you can't do what we need to be done. Is there some connection that says, okay, it can't be demolished ever, or how? Means it kind of the.
Well, demolition requires a COA and requires a Section 106 review. It's a process. Buildings do sometimes get demolished. It does happen. But basically, the idea here is to see if there are other avenues, and typically, historic preservation commissions will try to go out and find money to save things. So the only thing it really does is help you in terms of, let's say a contractor doesn't know what he's doing. If he brings in a COA that doesn't look right, they're going to look at that and go, well, that's not really going to work. So it's kind of, and Indiana Landmarks is our local consultant. So they review this stuff and they say, oh, well, that's the wrong procedure to use there. It's going to cause more damage. So in a way, it's just giving you an extra set of eyes beyond the building inspector who may not know how that building is constructed. So it's just an extra set of eyes. And like I say, if you get the national, it does open you up for grants and applications. And even if you've just applied for it, it opens you up too for certain things. So, I mean, it's an advantage. I think the community's pretty much in unison. They want to see that building saved. So taking advantage of whatever thing.
I'm not sure I would agree with that. We can leave that for another time. I mean, we all talk to different people, but, yeah, okay. Any other board comments or questions for Paul? No. Okay. Anything else, Paul?
Nope.
All right, thank you. Next, Patrick?
So I'm Patrick Long, 1524 North Street, 37-year resident.
Your microphone right there.
Make sure I get by the microphone so that I'm loud enough.
You're a soft talker.
Yeah, I always have been, right? But Scott Johnson is with me as well, and
Mark
Mark.
Johnson, well, I live in the county, is that okay? But it's 1750 East, Private Road, 340 North.
And some other people, so kind of want to speak to the pavilion, obviously. One thing I've noticed is that whether it's just the natural progression of where everything has to come from, but this is bounced around from city council to parks board to so many different areas that there's no central place where people are getting their information on it. We've tried to go from city council, parks board, this meeting didn't happen, that meeting happened, response for proposal didn't get answered today, or whatever that may be. And so with the information that is out there is complete hearsay information. So that's one frustration, I believe, on at least the people that I've communicated with, is that we don't have an idea of, hey, what's going on? Where are we moving forward with that? So as Jan mentioned earlier, if there's a committee that would be developed for that, I think we have some people who would be more than willing to serve on that committee, along with Parks Board members, council members. Being a part of this community for as long as I have, I can tell you that that pavilion is used more than probably any other piece we use as a community. And I'm sure that the other parks have benefited from that pavilion being closed over the summer, because quinceañeras, graduation parties, family get-togethers. My family was a really large family in town. We would use it to simply get together. It was free. It was available to us as a community. It's something we definitely don't want to see go away. The second thing I'll add is that tying this up with a bunch of red tape is asinine. I know you guys think that putting it on a historical reservation, putting these things in place, if it's where we're actually at with some of the engineering things and things need to happen now, I think there's enough people in the community that are willing to say, let's pitch in and get this thing fixed up to the point where we can get it reopened, right? Get it suitable for use. And as time happens, right? Engineering's already happened. If I'm correct on that. So we know where it's at. We also know that most engineers over-engineer things and then bring it back to a constructible state. We have contractors in this community that have proven their worth. So why don't we look at local contractors? Why don't we look at, if the committee is saying, hey, we need to do this, this, and this, and make sure that it happens, put it on a time constraint. And if we aren't meeting those goals moving forward, then that money can be allocated elsewhere. But again, I think it stands to be, or needs to be mentioned, that if we can get it in a central location and get people moving forward on it, we're not wasting money. I think that that's one part of the frustration on a lot of us is, this isn't rocket science. It's a wooden structure. It was built to be a dance hall. It was built to bring a community together. It definitely did that over 100 years.
140 years, whatever.
We've already made exterior
I think we
changes.
can fix it.
Sorry, what? Can you say that? I didn't hear you.
I think we could fix it up.
I think there's no doubt it can be fixed. It's a matter of what's involved and how much money it will cost. And that's
Well, I
where the
think you've
council.
got $100,000 in your budget set aside for that. I can't imagine that a group of contractors, local community members, can't throw in and get this thing to the point where it's functional again. And, I guarantee you, there are people that have enough influence in the community. We could put a crew together without, without going to all the additional steps. I just don't think that this is an insurmountable problem that has to have a lot of outside engineering. If we fixed it, I think we could fix it. And I think we could get local people to, step in and have a weekend, and we're fixing the pavilion this weekend. This is all born out of a conversation we had, a very casual conversation. And I think that's an option, and I think it gets a lot of local ownership to it. And I think there are plenty of people, with Pat's expertise and his company's expertise. I think we could patch this sucker up and get it back open, and it would be the community doing it, and it wouldn't be re-engineering the world. I just looked at a picture of that structure when it was flooded in 1912. It looks pretty much like it looks right now in 1912. I'm just thinking that the goal is to save it. The goal is we don't want it to disappear. And this is just another idea that we're presenting. And I think that's all we're doing here, is just presenting another idea, that if we can't go to the extremes, there are people that would be willing to pitch in and save the structure.
And I think it speaks directly to your guys' mission statement, is to preserve that heritage.
Yeah.
And the reality of it is that thing has gone through and seen so much. They always say if walls could tell stories, right? Well, if that pavilion could tell stories, it would tell stories of several of us generations. It's a mainstay to the community. But in the flip side to it, just like Scott said, I think that, our community lacks a few things, and one of that is an area for gathering for companies, right? Company picnics, things like that.
Yeah.
Where does it happen? Right? It's a perfect opportunity. We go in and we put in, maybe we get it to the point, okay, now it's structurally sound, and then the next
Right.
year we can do this.
We're
Next year
not, we're
we can
not
do
saying
that.
we'd be able to maybe do
Put
what
it to a
some of
historical
these other
reservation.
ideas are, but we could, I think there's plenty of us that would get together and pitch in and perhaps do it and create public involvement in it.
You mentioned you're already a 501(c). Has anybody reached out to the United Way, things of that nature? I mean, that's a perfect United Way Day project. I mean, and it puts, I know there's liabilities and there's stances and there's engineering and all that, but are we looking at all the avenues that allow us to bring community involvement, right? I mean, I can speak for the company I work for. I won't mention them as they aren't involved in it, but we do a ton.
We got the guys, is
But
what we're
we
saying.
do a ton with
Okay.
United Way. Shepherd does a ton with the United Way. All the
Yeah.
construction. I mean, we have 5 major construction companies in here. Bob Laughlin's already working with the city to develop and do things. I mean, we have those people in place. Why are we not using them?
Now, I'll
Why are
say,
we
I
reaching
haven't
out?
seen the engineering report, so I really don't know what we're promising. I'm very ignorant on this, I'll admit that. Pat's more knowledgeable about it. We just don't want to see it go away, and we don't want to see it, close for the next 2 years if we could do something, this fall to sort it out. So,
I think there's a couple things people have to decide, the community has to decide, is it historically going to be preserved, which means you need to, there was mention of having to bring even more old materials in because it was patched up 20 years ago. Do you need to have that stuff? Or are we looking at just keeping it as a part, as a pavilion?
I'd argue that the history is fantastic, and it's going to be a part of it. But I would argue that by getting it functional again, even if it's not exactly what we would all like it to be, it could continue to create new history.
I think that's where we're at. That's
Yeah.
where we're at, Mike.
So
is
we're
that
not,
saying,
we're not trying to
Hey,
argue
if we're
with
gonna go
anybody.
down-
We're just kind of throwing it out there that maybe a group of us could get together and sort this out at least.
But there are when you talk to people, there are two schools of thoughts. One is
Yeah.
Absolutely.
keep it exactly the way it is. Others are saying, let's put it back being usable as a pavilion. It can still look like, I mean, even when we had, I think it was Steinbergers that came into one of the meetings and talking about, these day and age, there's a lot of fiberglass things that look like they're historic.
Yeah, I don't know. You'd
Not
have to
necessarily.
do it with what you could do. You wouldn't be able to have a blank check, and it may not be, but that's always possible down the road. But at least maybe we could,
And I understand where they're coming from too.
Yeah.
The historical side is saying that, well, if we start here and we just start dismantling it and we start adding new structures, then we can't put it here.
I
But
think
the idea
we want it to look the
behind it-
same and be as functional as it always was, and I'm so uninformed about all the rest of this. I won't claim to be informed, but I'd hate to see us lose it.
My biggest concern there is, before it was a wooden floored building, and then when you go out there, they kind of poured the posts, either standalone, but there is no foundation there. So they poured a slab, and it's all sitting on a slab, and the slab's heaving different places. And so I think my fear is,
Hey, it's old.
you go to the roof section, and then if the foundation is still heaving and moving on you, then all of a sudden you've got it. So at one point, you know, this Stivers again was, when they were there, talked about, you know, could you jack up one portion, scrape out, tear out below, then rebuild that below. They even talked about if it needed to be historically preserved, could you make it shorter by taking some of the materials that you got? I mean, could it be rebuilt shorter or whatever? So I mean, they've had some ideas in those ways. You know, money is always going to be an issue.
Yeah.
And you know, we've had, you know, as an example, the dog park's been on the list of wants for like the last 10 years. And then they go to fundraising for it, and then people aren't fundraising for it. However, we've seen, I think both the State Theater and the Carousel were two examples of where people in town gave money to try to keep something that
But
they
if I'm not
value.
mistaken, there is money in the budget for.
Well, originally, the engineer originally thought they'd need $87,000 back before prices went up, just to fix the roof. But didn't, they
Well,
weren't.
the structure inside.
Yeah, because what you got, I mean, they got, Patrick, go up there, there's like 2 or 4 roof rafters. I mean, they're really nothing's set the right way, and there's like the ties are there for like 20-something feet, so they really don't, it's not like a current day truss where you'd see a pole barn that's like a 4-foot span or something like that. But, you know, and the engineer even said, like, you know, once you do the things they recommended, you might not want to use it on windy days still. It's like, ooh, that's kind of scary. You know, that we're going to have, you know, that. So there's
Been around a long time.
Exactly.
You know?
And so my concern is the foundation. My concern is the foundation. Because when they did this repairs a number of years back, I think it was Lauthan that did it actually, they put some steel things in there, but then they had a decorative piece that was here. So they weren't really carrying the load of the roof. They carried this encased it to try to carry a load, but they didn't take it all the way up to where the actual roof was. So I mean, I think it's a possibility to be done.
Yeah, I'm just
We
arguing.
need to get a definition of, okay, are we going to try? We want to keep it in the parks buildings in any way we can, or do we need to go to, you know, say, you know,
Yeah.
get on I assume you get on a historical registry list, all of a sudden they're going to want you to, it's like you mentioned, you know, if you got a building's got plaster and it's on the list, you can't just put drywall up, you've got to use plaster. I think that's how that works.
Actually, you can, because that'd be on the exterior.
Well-
Exterior is all you're talking about there, but for example, one thing we do, and the problem is when we start hiring contractors, we start all this, is it's something that's very simple, it's to be very complicated and
Yeah.
very expensive. For example, there used to be decorative pieces, all that went on each, inside of each entryway. If you're looking at a contractor, they're gonna want a custom millwork, blah, 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 all that. I worked on projects before where we used high school shop classes, and we used them, or like here at Career Center, to do that as a project. So that something that would be very expensive and very complicated, complex, really isn't, because you can take local resources and use those local resources and engage the community even more, like teaching a shop class or
Yeah.
career center or something. That's what they did with the Tower House. The whole tower was built by the Career Center.
I just don't think we want to see it go away. And we'd love to get it back open because, and however you guys decide is the best way to do that. Am I speaking out of turn by
No,
saying that?
I think that's exactly what we're saying,
Yeah.
is that I
And we
think
could
have
get
enough-
we could get a crew together if we need,
is
okay?
that we have enough support in
Yeah.
the community
Right.
that,
And I think the next challenge after that is, our mission system, like preserving stuff, and that pavilion, I mean, I can remember doing Cub Scout stuff there probably
Yeah.
40 years ago or whatever it was. And, and you'd have tons of cars parked on the grass, that kind of stuff. But in all these years, we never put a restroom with a pump station. We never put enough adequate parking in.
well, we're just talking about putting a kayak ramp in down there, because how many people are down there every single weekend?
Mm-hmm.
And how many people pull out of there and, hey, they go sit at a picnic table, and now we got.
Right.
And that ramp is really rough down. I mean,
It's rough, but
it's
that's that's the thing that I think we all can agree on here, Mike, is that the reality of it is that park is used.
Yeah,
That park
and
is
it's
huge.
rough. It's still, people are still using it.
You know, let's talk about, if you want to go down that path, let's talk about lighting down there. You get
Yeah.
out of there late in the evening, it's tough to even see
Yeah,
that.
and,
Talk about
you
the
could
pump
do
station.
whatever you wanted to do.
There's one mercury vapor light at the end of that pavilion. So I mean,
That's it.
people say, I remember having a wedding in there thinking, at nighttime, you really, I mean, I guess.
Well, there used to be a gazebo down there. I don't know if the gazebo's
It's still there.
But there's so much that happened down there. My suggestion is, like Dan mentioned, let's get a committee put together. Let's get something put together that we're moving forward on this and we're not delaying it. And whether the community decides to go down the historical preservation side, or we decide to go, hey, we're going to try and save this, or we're going to demolish it. Let's get a goal set to get something done with it, so that one, we're not sitting with another memorial home.
That's
Right,
a good
because we've
point.
sat on that,
Right.
we've sat on that project for years and years and years, and where are we at? The
Yeah.
same exact place, and all that's happened is money's gone down the drain. So if we spent $80-some thousand on getting engineering done, let's do something with it, let's be productive with it. Whether that's tear the structure down, remove it, and find something else that makes sense in that area
No.
for people to use.
No.
Or if it makes sense to say, okay, here's where we're at, this is what we need to do. This is what the community wants to see. I mean, you want to hear what the community has to say, but at the same token, you just don't want to let things go because, hey, it's going to cost too much money. We can find a way to get it done. United Way, people in this community have proven time and time again that if there is something positive to be done for the community, they're more than welcome to do that, and they're more than willing to step up to the plate when it comes to kids, youth, and involvement outdoors.
We got a chairman for our committee, I think.
Scott Johnson. Sign himself.
Oh, and got your address there, and are your phone numbers on the
Yeah.
sheet there?
Yeah.
We can contact you and.
I know where to get them both.
Yeah,
How to
As
get
soon as
them.
we're finding both of it? Okay.
so, that's all I got, thanks.
Thank you, Patrick and Scott. Any other visitor comments tonight? Okay, comments from the board. Eamon?
Oh, I just want to thank everybody for coming out, and it's good to see the passion for the pavilion to come out and to see it, so that was kind of refreshing to me, and it gives me hope that, people say they care, you only hear it online, or you only hear it to have them come in and say it really meant a lot to me to see his passion for it, So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay. I just got a couple things. Got contacted by someone locally about the dog park, and is a private donor looking to give $10,000, and it would be part of that match, so it would be worth 20 then at that point. I think it's a go. They haven't put it on the actual website, but they're a pretty solid person that's offered to do that. Second thing is, when I sat in on a Parks Foundation meeting of some sort with the dog park and things like that, and they talked about starting to have some volunteer days, much like it's done downtown and that kind of stuff. I don't know where that's going. I think they talked about July 29th,
30th,
30th. All right.
Sunday the 30th.
Okay.
And we're going to start at New Housing Park.
Having something there. Somebody mentioned, I guess it was Sam mentioned that Mike Fincher came to see him. Mike Fincher came to see me too. And was kind of, I got the past mayor understanding financial issues and that kind of stuff, started talking about volunteerism too in the parks, and how could people help and do it. I don't know how that works exactly. I mean, how you start passing out weed eaters or whatever to people. I don't know how that works, but there may be some interest there, and as I say, that may be needed. Finally, on top of that topic, I'm on a couple other boards where there's been discussions of this whole thing where the sheriff's department is offering to raise the pay for sheriff's deputies to be from another $8,000 to $10,000, and there's been some discussion of what happens to our police force in the city, and will people start to leave here to go to there, and then there was discussions about how do we fund keeping those police officers here, and and so then just having been around for a while, I know how this stuff kind of works sometimes. Is that and that's not fair. We all see the need for security with police and fire. And that's always kind of the key. But when you get the city, the street department, the parks department, the cemetery department, those kind of things, sometimes what happens is I've seen is that then the budget that Jan puts out there and says, hey, here's the budget we want to have. All of a sudden, when they say we got to spend another $800,000 on police benefits and salaries and stuff like that, all of a sudden they kind of, so I think that the discussions here with 501c3s and other groups out there are not a bad thing. Whether we've got people volunteering, I mean, people that cherish having parks. You know, I mean, there's a lot of things. We had people in the past that used to plant flowers, but then if you plant flowers, you got to weed between the flowers and et cetera. So I tell people off an example. There's across from our store on Eastgate Plaza, there's a patch there that 2 years ago, the shopping center guys on that side, they came in and they landscaped it, looked beautiful, and our people are going, well, maybe we should, you know, and our side, that's actually the Parks Department, but our store actually, we cut the grass for them. I think it's adopted, I think, somehow. So, but you know, you look at that now, it looks like heck because it's all grown up. There's weed. And last year, it grew up in weeds. They came in, they cleaned it out again, replanted, da-da-da-da. It looked good again. And this year, it looks terrible because it's just grown up into nothing. So it's just, I always tell people, it's easy to have the original idea. It's to carrying it through that you continue to maintain. Once you change that, you know, it was just grass before. Now it's got these decorative plants and wildflowers and stuff. It's hard to do that. So that's just again, and so just to wrap that up, you know, it concerned me some being on this board too, where there's talks about budgets, and when they start talking about changing things by, you know, $1 million or so for that, say, police thing as an example, it's scary. Because that's where we need to have folks that are passionate step up and help, because it's going to be a case where I've just seen that before where, you know, okay, you got to cut your budget by $250,000, and that's when all of a sudden this pavilion or something like that gets, you know, lined out or whatever. So anyway, but again, I was, you know, please talk to Mike Fincher, and, you know, and he kind of indicated, you know, that he's retired now and would like to, you know, he wouldn't mind helping around this and that. I don't know how you manage a volunteer force like that. But again, I think it's sure worth us listening to, because I think the futures with property tax caps and that kind of stuff, I don't see tons of new funding coming to the parks. I just don't see it. So anyway, thank you.
All right, well, I have no comment for tonight, so I will call for a movement to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we will adjourn the Parks meeting for July 9th.